So the Booktubeathon was a thing that happened, and it didn't go to plan. I mean, I planned for it not to go to plan. It wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. I just didn't get everything done that I wanted to get done, and there was a lot of reevaluating of the challenges and what books I was gonna do for what challenge. Basically, when I said that my TBR was an MBR, I was right. I'm not even sure how to order this wrap-up because I went about it in such a weird way. So the first challenge for the Booktubeathon 2016 was to read a book with yellow on the cover. For this, I originally planned to read Fates and Furies by Lauren Groff, but that just didn't happen. As I was progressing through all of the books I was reading during the readathon, I realised that this was the challenge that I was going to end up doing last if I decided to read Fates and Furies, and basically I just ran out of time. I am disappointed that I didn't get to Fates and Furies, but I will still read it relatively soon. If you watched my TBR, you may remember that I was going to read The Smell of Other People's Houses by Bonnie Sue Hitchcock for a later challenge, and both covers of this book have a little bit of yellow on them. I think that's enough yellow to constitute yellow on a cover. So I'm actually going to say that I read this book for the first challenge, and there will be a replacement book for the challenge that it was originally planned for. I could have doubled up, but I didn't want to do that. The Smell of Other People's Houses is about 4 teenagers, Ruth, Alice, Dora, and Hank, and it is set in Alaska in the 1970s. And it is told from those 4 different perspectives, and all of their stories become entangled and entwined. And over the course of the novel, we are able to work out from little clues what the connection is. I wasn't really that interested in the characters in this novel, unfortunately, but I was really drawn in by the landscape. The Alaskan setting was really captivating for me. I definitely learned a lot about the terrain and the culture of Alaska through this book. I do have a full review of this one, so if you want to hear more of my thoughts on that, there will be a link down in the description. The next challenge was to read a book only after sunset, and I actually managed to achieve this one. Not as easily as I expected though, because on 2 of the nights during the Booktubeathon I had an hour-long commute, and I thought I would get a huge chunk of the reading for this challenge done during that commute, but it just didn't happen. I really wasn't in the mood for reading. So I actually ended up right down to the very end of the Booktubeathon for this. I ploughed through it in like the last 2 nights. I read Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard, and I really enjoyed this book. I know a lot of people had mixed feelings on it, but I really enjoyed it. This is about a society that is split into 2 groups, the Reds and the Silvers. The things that distinguish them are the colour of their blood. So the Reds have red blood and the Silvers have silver blood. The Silver Bloods also have these kind of magical powers that the Reds don't have. There's definitely a power imbalance between those 2 groups in society. But a girl named Mare, who is red-blooded, turns out to have some of these extra powers. And she gets entangled into the royal society and entangled in lies and betrayal, and it's really good. It is a really good fantasy YA book, and I really enjoyed it, and I'm really looking forward to getting to the next book in the series, Glass Sword. That's the sign when you've enjoyed a book that is a part of a series. You want to pick up the next one soon. The next challenge was to read a book that you discovered through Booktube, and obviously I had planned to read The Smell of Other People's Houses for this challenge, and I could have doubled up, but then I had a brainwave. The Vegetarian by Han Kang. Very short book I definitely wouldn't have picked up if I didn't hear about it through Booktube. The perfect solution. So The Vegetarian is set in Korea and is about a woman who decides to become a vegetarian after having a terrible dream. This is entirely shocking to the people around her, her family, friends, acquaintances. So while someone becoming a vegetarian might not be that shocking to a Western reader, although people do get quite shocked if you tell them you've become a vegetarian anyway, it's much more extreme in this culture. This book also follows the decline of the protagonist's mental health to the point where she wants to become a plant. I really enjoyed this book. I flew through it in 1 sitting. I thought it was fantastic. The writing was brilliant, the characterization was brilliant. It was just brilliant. Next challenge was to read a book by one of your favourite authors, and for this I read The Heart Goes Last by Margaret Atwood. I was actually halfway through this book. I DNF'd it like a while ago, and I was planning on reading the entire thing through again, but 1, I realised I wasn't going to have time for that, and 2, as soon as I picked it up halfway through, I was right back in that story. I remembered everything. I didn't need to refresh my memory at all. So this is a kind of dystopian book, predominantly about one couple, and What happens in this dystopian society is that a community is set up where you live a month with a relatively normal life and then a month in prison. This one couple starts off as a very normal couple, but they become entangled in something that is much deeper than either of them understand. I really enjoyed this book. It wasn't the best, most amazing thing that I'd ever read. Basically, I didn't enjoy it as much as The Handmaid's Tale, but nonetheless, it was a really great book. Next challenge I only half completed, and that was to read and watch a book-to-movie adaptation. Originally, I had planned to read and watch Stardust by Neil Gaiman. That didn't happen. But I managed to read Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. Didn't manage to get the film watched, but I am planning on doing it soon. This is about a 17-year-old girl named Catherine who is one of the 10 children of a clergyman, and essentially it follows what happens to her when she goes to Bath and all the different experiences and how she changes from her experiences in Bath. Huge amount about novels and gothic novels and gender, and it's really sassy, and I loved it. I liked it so much more than I liked Pride and Prejudice. Northanger Abbey was so good. So pleased when I was enjoying it. Like, I was drawn in from the very first chapter. This one bit where they're talking about history, and like, I can't remember what she says, but it's something like, oh, history's just full of men, like, where are all the women? And I was just like, yeah. So for the next challenge to read a book that was older than you, I could have doubled up again. I could have had Northanger Abbey for that challenge, but I decided to pick up a little black classic instead, which I can't find. I still haven't unpacked. It was Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Maria Rilke. This is basically a bunch of letters that a poet, Rainer Maria Rilke, exchanged with a budding poet over quite a lengthy period of time, and there's lots of general life advice and advice about poetry. I think it would be something that I really loved. I didn't love it. Don't know what it is. I don't like books with tons of advice in them, I think. And obviously these weren't intended as books, they were intended as letters, and they were intended to have advice in them. It's not a fault of the work in any way. I don't like being given loads of advice. There's definitely a lot of valuable things that I took from it, and I would recommend it as a very short, quick read. That I did get stuff out of it, I just didn't enjoy it as much as I expected to. So for the final big challenge to read 7 books, I kind of got that done because on the very first night of the Booktubeathon, as in like clock struck midnight and the Booktubeathon begins, I was finishing off Joanna Callan's The Trouble with Goats and Sheep. And I do have a full review of that on my blog, so I will leave it down in the description, but it doesn't really count because it was the last couple chapters. The overall review of the Booktubeathon, it was okay. Could have gone better. I think I would have enjoyed it so much more if I wasn't travelling while it was going on. I think I could have relaxed a lot more because there was just a lot of time during the day where I just couldn't read at all. I think I would have properly got through my TBR if I was at home, but I wasn't. Over the course of the Booktubeathon, the book that I probably enjoyed the most was Northanger Abbey, or maybe Glass Sword. It's a toss-up between one of those two. I am really gutted that I didn't get to read Fates and Furies, but that meant I did read The Vegetarian instead, and I really loved The Vegetarian. I am going to read Fates and Furies soon, so if it's not in my July wrap-up, it will be in my August wrap-up. Oh my god, it is nearly August. It's nearly August.